Hi all, welcome to Physio Exam Buddy. This video is on the stretch reflex and the other name or synonym for the stretch reflex is myotactic reflex. You can expect the question as myotactic reflex also. And it is a classical example for the monosynaptic reflex. That is, in the reflex arc of the stretch reflex, there is only one synapse present. When a skeletal muscle with an intact nerve supply is stretched, it contracts, and this response it is known as the stretch reflex or the myotactic reflex. The classical examples for the stretch reflex include mainly the deep tendon reflexes like knee jerk, ankle jerk, biceps jerk, etc. And this stretch reflex or the myotactic reflex, it is the fundamental basis of the muscle tone as well as the posture. Going to the reflex arc of the stretch reflex, and this is the diagram you have to draw when a question is asked as stretch reflex. The reflex arc begins with the stimulus, and in case of stretch reflex, the stimulus is the stretch of the muscle, and the receptor it is the muscle spindle which is located in the belly of the skeletal muscle. And from this receptor, that is the muscle spindle, the afferent it is carried by the 1A fibers. So the afferent nerve is the 1A fiber, and here the center it is the spinal segment which is present at the same level, and the neurotransmitter released at this synapse it is the glutamate, which is a classical example of an excitatory neurotransmitter. And the neurotransmitter glutamate it will excite this efferent motor neuron, and in case of stretch reflex it is the alpha motor neuron supplying the same muscle, and the effect it is the contraction of the same muscle. Next is about the central delay, and what is the central delay is that it is the time taken for the reflex activity to traverse the spinal cord, that is the time taken from stimulus to the response, that is the time taken for this reflex activity to traverse the spinal cord, that is the central delay. And in case of stretch reflex it is 0.6 to 0.9 millisecond, whereas the reaction time it means the time application between the stimulus as well as the response, and in case of stretch reflex it is 19 to 24 millisecond. In case of stretch reflex, it includes two components. The first one is known as the dynamic stretch reflex, and the second one is the static stretch reflex. Now we will see in detail about the dynamic stretch reflex as well as the static stretch reflex. Dynamic stretch reflex is usually elicited by giving potent dynamic signals, whereas continuous static receptor signals give rise to static stretch reflex. In case of dynamic stretch reflex, it is mainly transmitted through the primary nerve endings. We have already studied the structure of the muscle spindle and the innervation. For reference, you can see and watch the video in our channel itself on muscle spindle. Whereas in case of static stretch reflex, the nerve supply, the innervation is mainly via the primary and the secondary nerve endings which supply the muscle spindle, transmits this static stretch reflex. And the response occur because of the rapid stretch or unstretch in case of dynamic stretch reflex, whereas if the stretch is applied for a prolonged period, you will get the static stretch reflex. And this dynamic stretch reflex, it occurs or over within a fraction of second, and this will prevent the sudden changes in the muscle length, whereas in case of static stretch reflex it occurs for a prolonged period also, and the degree of muscle contraction remain reasonably constant. That's about the stretch reflex. Thank you.